Okay, hey, we're doing to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really fun review brought to you by Titoni. A little bit about them. They're a family-owned, Swiss-made independent brand since 1919. And at the heart of Titoni's philosophy stands its credo to produce Swiss-made mechanical watches of the highest quality at affordable prices. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language you're looking for a diver are going to be, of course, having water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is the Seascoper 300, and it is their new mid-range option to their flagship Seascoper 600 diver. But this is a bit slimmer and also only has about half the water resistance minus the in-house movement, but still retaining the chronometer accuracy while also featuring all of the other fully loaded benefits of its bigger brother for about $400 less. What does that equate to? Well, $1,750 for, again, a Swiss-made diver from a family-owned independent brand since 1919, which is pretty cool. And some of you are probably wondering why you haven't heard of Titoni. It's because they're independent and they honestly weren't available in North America. Always. It's taken some time and it's only happened over the years in terms of availability. I will say that this brand caught my eye years and years before I was able to get my hands on this one, but now they're actually a little bit more accessible, offering e-commerce direct-to-consumer availability for those of us who are in North America. So it definitely works out. And I do appreciate Titoni for sending this watch in so I could share it with all of you. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, this thing is something special. I will say, of course, I've always heard great things about Titoni. I experienced my first Titoni not too long ago, and it was in this really nice kind of Genta-esque design with an integrated bracelet. Very, very cool. And honestly, it was something where I was like, man, this kind of, made the Tissot PRX seem kind of like a toy by comparison. And I will say this Titoni is making a lot of the competition feel, again, a lot less serious by comparison. It's just that good. But this does garner a premium price tag. This isn't going to be just a few $100s more than the competition, especially when you're thinking of the competition being, let's say, Swiss-made divers that are within, let's say, the Swatch group. I would say this is most comparable to something like the Longines Hydro Conquest, and it is very comparable in price. But of course, Longines isn't the only brand that the Swatch group has. They have brands like Tissot, they have brands like Mito, they have brands like Certina, all with dive watch options, right? So again, I will say that compared to that, of course, those watches are going to be much more affordable. But this is a Swiss-made chronometer, so this does have COSC specs in terms of its timekeeping. So it's going to be also the accuracy is checked in 5 positions, so you can expect much better timekeeping. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is this clasp mechanism is going to be pretty much unrivaled, when it comes to mainstream Swiss, at least anything that's within, under, let's say, $2,000. Anything under $2,000, this is going to be better, in terms of Swiss-made heritage brands. So we'll go back to that. But even without that, this is a really, really cool watch. It has a 42mm diameter, so a full-size diver. I will say it's not oversized. A lot of it has to do with the play in terms of the way that they executed the dial to bezel ratio, the wide, broad shoulders here on these lugs. So 42mm in diameter, 12.3mm thick there. Very nice. And you can see relatively thin profile, although it does have, kind of a slab-sided mid case, even though it is polished. And you can already see it's already picked up some scuffs here and there. Although it's polished, that slab siding isn't going to do the watch any favors in terms of its appearance, trying to be thinner. But it's actually a thin, again, 12.3. I mean, we're celebrating Seiko putting out a diver that was 12.5 millimeters. So 12.3, definitely not bad. The lug to lug though is a bit long at 51.7 millimeters lug to lug. It does have a nice curve down, and even the male end links also curve down, which doesn't extend the lug to lug at all. And if it does, it's not by much. And then of course you're getting numerous brushed and polished surfaces there. Getting into the crystal, it is a flat sapphire crystal that you can almost not even see because it does have a really nicely applied anti-reflective coating on there. And then this bezel, of course, like you would expect from a really well-made dive watch. Ooh, oh, it's a little slippery with the gloves on. Okay, maybe I can't do this with the gloves. I was playing with this earlier. All right, gloves off. There we go. You can even hear it now. Very nice action. The reason why I wanted to have the gloves on is because you can see the glossy ceramic. I'm leaving fingerprints all over it, but the action on this 120 click bezel, it's up there. Very nice. I love the balance between clickiness on the ratcheting and smoothness. That's something I always look for. I don't want it to be too clicky to where it's harsh, and I don't want it to be too smooth to where you can't feel each tactile click. So this was actually very good. I will say it is quite thin though, so that might have been one of the contributions to the gloves really having trouble gripping there. So hey, if you're wearing dive gloves, unless you have like rubber grips on them, might be something to consider. But honestly, although you could take this diving, you probably wouldn't want to. It's honestly too nice to. I mean, I take it into the water for sure, but it's a very nice, like, this is the definition of desk diver, corporate, everyday, like, it just does those things right. The same things that we love about, let's say, the timelessness of the Rolex Submariner, of the Omega Seamaster Professional. This has a lot of those same hallmarks in terms of it being just like super versatile everyday diver. This isn't hardcore tool diver, although it is very capable, of course. It is more so, just that professional person's watch, and it's very, very impressive, to say the least. Now, the movement inside, although you can't see it, is actually a Sellita SW200 chronometer grade. So it's, pretty much the best one that they make for the 200. And you can see the case back actually has a mirror that's mirror polished. So you can see, look, the reflection of the back of the clasp there, which I think is pretty interesting. So very cool, high polished, a little different, you wouldn't expect that, but the fact that it's able to reflect and then there's not even that much distortion just shows you how high polished that is. And of course it's there to mimic a porthole window. So pretty cool. Right now you're probably seeing the reflection of the tripod, parts of the camera, but very, very neat nonetheless. Oh, reflection of my finger there. So very, very cool. I mean, I think so anyway. Because they could have just easily left that alone, and having that, who knows, you'd be in a situation you need a mirror. You got one. All right, you got one. All right, now Getting into the dial, it is a very nice glossy black dial with applied indices. It has polished hands with centerline contouring, so you can see they do have a little fold to them in the center. And then, of course, there are some painted accents as well, at least on the second's hand, you can see there. And then you do have the date, which has a nice painted frame on there, outlined at the 3 o'clock. I think it's very nicely balanced. You know, some of you might be wishing that they would have done a black date. I think the white date works well in this case. And getting into, you know, we do see the water resistance across the dial there. 300 meters of water resistance, or 30 atmospheres, 20 millimeter lugs. Very nice in terms of strap options there, right? 3-link bracelets, solid links and end links here, guys, just like you would expect. Pin and collar connectors, so that's not for everyone. Not everybody loves that. I will say the nice thing about pin and collars are it's set it and forget it. You'll never have to worry about those pins backing out or anything like that. Cross-threading, none of that. You just set it up once. It's a little, you know, maybe a little hectic trying not to lose the little collars, but other than that, you'll be good to go. I do all the bracelet sizing on all my watches myself, so I will say that, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with pins and collars at this point. It does have a nice taper down to about 17.8 millimeters at this 20 millimeter clasp, and this is, for me, the unsung hero of this watch, guys. I really, really like the way that they executed, and we've seen this on the channel before, once before, from a micro brand that did it. I'm not saying the micro brand invented it, but I'm just saying, like, this is how uncommon it is that it was years later seeing this now implemented again. So it's basically you push their button. The button is the logo, so you push the logo button, and yes, that's how you control the micro adjust. So very cool. And then you get 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. You can ratchet it in so you hear each click, so you know kind of where to stop. And then that's how you figure out your fit. And then let's say it's on your wrist and you'd like to let it breathe. The nice thing is you can see this is pretty much flush mounted, so laying your wrist down isn't going to accidentally press the button. You can see even if I press on it, you really have to press it down, so it's not going to happen by accident, which I really can appreciate. And yeah, that way you can dial in your perfect fit, guys. So very cool, really impressive. I love how this was executed. Again, guys, you're going to be paying upwards of $3,000 for something in terms of, you know, toolless micro adjust that is this well integrated. And again, a heritage, you know, Swiss independent brand. Even some of the group, you know, non-independent brands out there, they're not going to have something that's going to be this well executed. They'll have, you know, you've seen from Certina ratcheting divers extensions, Certina Mito. Those are not, you know, micro adjusts. Those are divers extensions. So totally different feature. But a lot of people kind of like to group them together. You will have micro brands that were going to have similar feature sets, but again, this also is, again, a brand family-owned, Swiss-made independent since 1919. So that means a lot to certain folks. I know this isn't necessarily a region where people have a lot of name recognition for Titoni, but that doesn't change that fact. So with that said, let's actually get it on my wrist to see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really, really beautifully. Fantastic, actually. It wears like a full-size dive watch, a tool dive watch. This is again some vintage inspired big crown that's meant to be petite. And hey, actually, I think I clamped it down a little tight. Let me just press the button. Oh, now it's looser. Nice. So this is, you know, although it is meant to be large, it's not oversized at all. This, for me, 42, I consider that in between 40 and 42 a full-size dive watch. And then you get bigger than 42, you can go into a large dive watch. You get smaller than 40, then you can get into kind of mid-sized divers. But this thing's really nice. Of course, if I get my wrist too close to the camera, there's going to be a lot of lens distortion. It's going to appear much larger than it actually is. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low here and then just tighten up the actual frame, so you guys can get a little bit of a truer aspect ratio of how this piece might sit on your wrist while still getting a nice, clean, detailed look. I really like the color choices here. You know, of course they do have a blue dial, blue bezel option, or black dial, black bezel option. But I think the play of the two, it just helps it stand out. It looks different. You're not going to think it's a Submariner. You're not going to think that it's a Seamaster. So having that little juxtaposition, you know, against each other, I think really helps it give it its own personality, especially with that nice bright red accent, which can even look like a deep orange in certain lighting conditions. But that is a really good looking watch, guys. Again, very comparable to something like the Longines Hydro Conquest, but that's not a COSC chronometer, is it? So not going to keep as good time as this. But if it does, you know, it does. But at the end of the day, you know, a chronometer is actually spec'd to do that. You're not just going to get lucky and get good timekeeping. You're going to get good timekeeping because it's already, you know, been through its paces and it's a higher grade movement. So very, very cool, very nice, guys. But with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out. It's set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, this is a dive watch, and it has dive worthy loom. Very, very well applied there. You can see the loom pip is a little bit small, so maybe I didn't get enough charge on it just sitting here under the studio lights. So what I'll do is I'll hit it with a little black light there to kind of supercharge it, see what kind of performance we can get out of it. Okay, so all right, that's the one thing I'll say so far, at least, that I found wasn't the greatest, unfortunately, is that that loom pip is going to be slightly dim as compared to the rest of the loom, which is actually very, very strong. You know, comparatively, something like this, just the application of that BGW9, it looks really, really, really good. Like, that is glowing very bright, and there's a lot of surface area there, apart from, again, the very small loom pip, which doesn't have too much surface area, unfortunately. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a little bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of a building, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, maybe spending some time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. You can even see that it's exposing my fingerprints around that bezel, little smears and smudges. So those are things that typically could get washed away, now exposed. So I could even do some high contrast lighting here, which we can look at the way the light glides over that brushing, nice and uniform. So very cleanly done there. But yeah, it's nice to see, you know, what these colors, textures, and finishes, like I mentioned, render like in this type of mixed lighting situation. Because yeah, a lot of times you can see a picture of a watch and it's just like the exact color that you wanted it to be, and then realistically where you're going to spend your day to day, it's not going to render like that. Like, look at this. This is a very dark watch. The dial is black, and the bezel is, although ceramic, and it typically will appear to be brighter blue in, you know, more direct lighting situations. In less than direct lighting, you can see it has its way of kind of fading. The nice thing is how legible those indexes are on that bezel. Like, that is really impressive to see under mixed lighting conditions that the bezel is still very, very legible. So nice tool roots there by Titoni coming through. So apart from the smudging on that glossy ceramic, which you're going to have an issue with any glossy ceramic, bezel insert And then, of course, kind of a small loom pip considering how large the indices and hands are. Even that seconds hand has a nice amount of loom on it. Let's get to the closing thoughts. So on the wrist, it wears really well. It has that high quality heft to it, though it still feels, of course, still tough and chunky, but still nicely refined. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site links in the description for options and availability. There are actually quite a few options, greens, blacks, blue, a lot of different ones, and then of course mixtures of different types of dials, combination with bezels and whatnot. In terms of comparable models, this is a great comparable to the Longines Hydro Conquest, which retails for about $17.75. So this is $17.50, that's $17.75 again, but the Hydro Conquest isn't a chronometer, and it actually trades down its beat rate to 3.5 hertz, so only 200 vibrations per hour to get that extended 72-hour power reserve. So that's a trade-off. So it gets a longer power reserve but a slower beat. And then it sports, of course, that extremely underwhelming diverse clasp by comparison, because this one is very, very good. So, you know, in terms of the integration and everything, really well engineered. So for me, guys, bottom line, although this is not a super well-known brand in North America, Titoni have been making excellent strides these past few years, making their products more and more competitive and desirable. You know, even though they have over 100 years of watchmaking experience, they're still working to get your business and aren't relying on just brand name and cachet or famous brand ambassadors. Think of it this way, you know, why get an Aqua Racer when the Longines Hydro Conquest exists? It's kind of like, why get a Hydro Conquest when the Seascoper exists at this point, right? Like, it's just giving you so much. And again, although I say Longines probably does work for your money, let's say a brand like Tag Heuer, they're, you know, they put out nice stuff, they have iconic designs, but they're just not working as hard for your money when it comes down to some of those finer details. And I think the cool thing about Titoni is that they clearly are working hard for your money. They are adding those little bevels on the insides of the lugs. They're doing the cool trick clasp that really has been relegated down to your typical micro brand has been doing that, but mainstream brands really haven't too much. And one of the ones that have, let's say Tudor, yeah, that's going to be even more expensive. So pretty cool that Titoni is able to do that. So with that said, I know this was a little bit of a long one. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.